So what we then do is say, okay, if we're looking to create a profit model, we then look at all of the elements where we have to either generate revenue, spend money, invest in community. In our case, I haven't got enough there, but there's around 8 of these things which all tie together to create all the trade-offs to create that profit model, of which we tie together through, firstly, the values of the organisation, the heritage, and also the good strategy. And that's all overlaid against what's happening in, just basically what's happening almost in the economy, what's happening in the industry, and in our case, what's happening in the competition. So we take into account all of those things, obviously, when we're taking into account. But when we're building this thing, so what we're basically saying, if one of these is, for instance, team, we have to weigh up, and one of these is community, to invest another $200,000 in community to try and create to build our supporter base in the long term to overcome what is strategically an issue, or do we put on, another assistant coach and support that assistant coach with an extra amount of resources? So it's all those sorts of trade-offs, and you have to give yourself a mechanism by which you can actually do that. And probably the most interesting pieces of feedback I've got relates to this profit model that organisations with whom or people within organisations who have been watching this have really challenged themselves to establish what their profit model is. And we use the heritage again, once again, as one of the key components of it, but always based on strong values. And I did one particular Whiteboard Wednesday on that. So this one, I think, got to mention, this was in Whiteboard Wednesday 1. So if you're looking to refer back, this one was, I think, Whiteboard Wednesday 2. So it's really nice and easy, from that point of view. But again, it'll give you a bit of feedback as to, it'll be worth watching again if you're interested in that type of notion. The last one, and that's perhaps the most complex, is this one we call the strategic staircase, which was that particular model, which looks very complicated, but is in fact far simpler than what it is. And what this basically is doing is understanding that the club's it's called Horizons Model Strategy. We'll call it the strategic staircase. Whiteboard Wednesday 8 from memory, which was the one where I spoke to the Mates of Melbourne group, and it's a fairly basic 4x4 matrix. 1, 2, 3. And what we say is that we're putting it into stages, or steps. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we've also broken it into phases, whereby we then say, okay, what phase are we at in this is getting really messy, in regard to each of those areas, and build on. And the reason for that is that we're saying, okay, what is the core thing that we're trying to establish here? And we know that we're basically investing in this area at the moment. And then we say, okay, once we feel comfortable about that, we're then moving into the next stage, and so on and so forward. And the reason for this is that in footy clubs, you don't have any lack of good ideas, but what you have to do is always focus on the building of capability. So the focus across this line is to build capabilities, and the focus up that line is to actually broaden your capabilities. And the terms I use in this one was high performance with high integrity. In this particular area, it was richness of our relationships, fielding champion teams, and the final one is the growth imperative. And we've named each of the phases. And basically, the first step for us was to get ourselves back in the game as a competitive club in the AFL competition. Step 2 was to be in the game. At half time in a game of footy, you want to be within distance of the team you're playing. Round 1 against Hawthorn, we weren't. Most other games, we've at least been roundabout in the game. Probably against the Cats on the weekend, were that little bit of a distance away. They really jumped us at the start. Third quarter is always the premiership quarter, and the fourth quarter, the relentless nature of AFL footy, it's a game the game never won. So we've deliberately phased it, and there's no embarrassment from the fact that we've really spent most of our time in this area, because this area includes things like facilities, it includes things like getting our operations right, it includes things like building our community, all of those really critical areas of which we have to get right. But that doesn't mean, whilst you're focused on that you're not making progress in these other areas, like for instance customer and strategic relationships and all these things fit into this area. And yes, we have made progress, and fielding champion teams is in this one, and yes, we have made progress, and we think in the growth imperative of what we're doing out at Casey we are making progress, but the real investment's been down at this level. And in each of these cases, and I think this year, for instance, we're moving very much into this phase in terms of our richness of our relationship, where we can feel as though we're starting to make some ground in regard to not only our current membership base and supporter base, but looking at growth and good, strong relationships with the AFL. And as I mentioned in the last Whiteboard Wednesday, we're also looking at the brands themselves. So as messy as this whiteboard actually is at the moment, hopefully it'll give you that context. The first one is creating the narrative where people understand it. And one of the comments I got from the Whiteboard Wednesday feedback was, where's the vision? And I say, well, that's really the vision there. The vision sits in this area. We don't actually make big structured vision statements or anything along those lines. I think as you understand this model a little bit more, you can start to be more direct as to what a specific vision statement can in fact look like. But in the main, it's about creating that narrative, and any person around the footy club should be able to, you say, okay, what's the Melbourne Footy Club is about? And they go, it's about this, this, this and this, and they should all understand it. Always try and understand what your profit model is, in particular the various strategic trade-offs that you have to make at any stage. What gives those trade-offs, and what we then try to do is to understand where we're investing now versus the future, because sometimes you might say, I'm going to invest a little bit less now but more into the future here, is understanding this, which is, for those who want to study a little bit more, is called Horizons Model Strategy. And it's a McKinsey's structure, which has been around for some time, where they basically, it looks something like that, in terms of time and broadening of capabilities, if that's sort of time over there, and that's investment as it goes up there. So it's that type of strategy which we've sort of chewed up and spat out and ended up with our own type of framework in regard to it all. As the future Whiteboard Wednesdays evolve, I'll start to talk more about probably the things which people have the most interest in, which is mainly the pointy end footy stuff, where people always want to understand where we're at, and particularly through the first phases of that, the first one being list management, second one being player development, which is, I'll probably talk about at the next Whiteboard Wednesday, just the investment we're making in player development, and ultimately it's about team performance. And the objective in all of this is obviously built to win. We want to build a footy club which is always ready and always capable of giving itself the best chance of winning, knowing that it'll have its ups and downs as a natural process of the current rules that we've actually got, but always gives itself the best chance. So come week 12, Maddie, I think I've done my messiest whiteboard thus far, but hopefully it'll give you a bit of an idea for the various contexts of what we're doing. As of next week, we'll get back onto more specifics, but I thought it was worth reflecting at this stage just where we're at. Hope you enjoyed the Whiteboard Wednesday, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. Thanks.